All right, time for again something slightly different. I'm going to do a sort of review of my personal thoughts about the cards in the most recent chapter pack, the in Daznak's Pit. I decided that I want to go ahead and do card reviews for each pack just because I have enough thoughts that I'd like to share them. And this chapter pack is the most recent one. It came out before my YouTube channel actually started. So I guess we're going to go back in time slightly here and go ahead and do this one. And then we've got the last pack in this cycle coming out fairly soon in like 10 days or something like that. So that can get a review as well. I'm not going to like give them numbers or like rate them out of 5 like I think some reviewers do, like the card reviews on this site, CardGameDB. I don't think that's really useful because it's like too one-dimensional to reduce a card down to just some, arbitrary number like that. You can have a card that's really good in a certain deck. Maybe it's a 5 out of 5 if you build for it, but like a 1 out of 5 if you don't, something like that. There's cards that are good in a certain time in the game and then bad at other times. So, for example, Frozen Solid, when it first came out, was not very useful because there were not that many big impact locations to target with it. But ever since Flea Bottom released, it's become one of the best start cards and still is right now. So I don't think it's that useful to just give numbers like that. I mean, if something is like always an auto include, instead of saying this card is a 5 out of 5, I think it's more useful to say you should always have this card, in your deck for this faction, like Drown God Fanatic, cards like that. So let's get started. We've got a Pinch of Powder. Obviously, this card has seen some play already and can do some pretty dirty stuff. It's very annoying. I think my biggest issue with this card in terms of its usefulness is it feels like a bit of a win more card. Like, if you can pay the 3 for this and win by 5, then you probably have a stronger board state than the opponent anyways, and you may not necessarily need this effect. Although certainly, no doubt if you can pull this off, bouncing big 6 or 7 cost characters, it can just win you the game. It's very powerful if you can trigger it. I think its best homes would be maybe in... I've seen people using it in Reigns of Castamere, like Lannister, and doing big intrigues, and you can stealth the defender with Tyrion. He can give you Challenges Phase Gold for the Shadow One ambush. That seems good. Maybe in like a Greyjoy unopposed themed sort of deck, where you can use raiding longships and stealth and all kinds of junk like that to make it very easy to win power by 5. And of course, there is the notable combo of the Raider from Pike, the Greyjoy character, which allows you to ambush this weapon for 0 gold. It's supposed to cost 3, instead it costs 0. That's extremely obnoxious, and obviously it's pretty good if you do that. It's still not super consistent because it's a 2-card combo with neither of the 2 cards for the combo actually doing anything to help you win by 5. The Raider from Pike only has a military icon. But if you can leverage that combo, it is definitely a game winner and very obnoxious. Overall, I don't like this card because there's not really any counterplay to it. Like, Treachery is the only thing that you can use to try to stop it. And that's only a temporary solution because it's not terminal. So it just sits there and they can trigger it over and over again. And because it's not terminal, once someone gets to trigger it once, they probably get too far ahead for you to stop them and you lose. So I don't know. It's kind of non-interactive in my opinion, but it's definitely a powerful card that I think will see some play. The Bear Island Scout. This is a small House Stark character with the reaction after you marshal it. You can search your deck for a House Mormont card and add it to your hand, but every character you control has to have the Stark affiliation. That's pretty easy to accomplish. This is a pretty solid character because you just marshal it and go get Daisy Mormont. And it's only costs 2, so good flea bottom character, good little chud for sacrificing purposes. I think this card will see a fair bit of play in Stark decks just to round out the cost curve. It is loyal, but Breaking Ties is out of the picture, so who cares? Not much else to say about this, just a generally solid little dude. We've got the Brightwater Host, which is a big Tyrell army. With the reaction after you win a challenge in which they're attacking, you choose a card in Shadows and return it to its owner's hand. Then a unique Tyrell character you control gains 2 power. I doubt this will ever see any play. The 6 cost it's too awkward to pay for 6 cost non-uniques. You know, the expensive non-uniques have never really seen much play in this game. They really need to have extremely powerful, like, you know, game-deciding type of effects in order to be worth it, like the roaming wolf pack with the brand that can stand them and give them icons. That's one of the only examples I can think of. I definitely don't see this being worth it. It's way too conditional because if there's just not a card in Shadows, then it is a blank 6/5 Bicon non-unique, which is really bad stat-wise. Very inefficient when you could be playing like Randall Tarley or Renly Baratheon or whoever. So I doubt this ever gets used. I guess if Shadows becomes so popular that you just expect to go up against opponents' decks that have Shadow stuff every single game, maybe it will become viable as counterattack, but I doubt it. I guess maybe they'll print an army agenda one day and this will actually be used. Until then, probably sits in the binder. We've got Double Dealing. This is a weird card. As a plot action, not a win revealed, in action in the plot phase, you choose a plot card in the opponent's use pile. Double Dealing gains its text until you reveal a new plot card, which seems unnecessary because when you reveal a new plot card, I don't know, maybe it could have text in the use pile. Anyways, this plot seems bad because there's just not enough plots with passive text that are played often enough for it to ever really have much to copy. I'm really having trouble thinking of anything useful that this could copy that actually sees a common amount of play. Basically, every common plot is like a win revealed effect. The only one that maybe is sort of played sometimes that can be worth it would be Peace and Prosperity. If you copy Peace and Prosperity with this, then it becomes a really powerful economy plot with crazy high stats. It's like a effectively 10-7-1 or something like that. But it requires your opponents to open with Peace and Prosperity, which, I mean, they're just not going to. The plot's just not popular enough for that to be worth it. So even though it's 5-7-1, really good stats, you might as well just use Varys' Riddle if you want an effect like this. One less initiative in exchange for a copying effect that will actually do something. The scheme trait is unfortunate with the fact that this is a plot action and not win revealed, because it means you cannot use this in Reigns of Castamere. Or rather, you can, but it will not do anything because you will be revealing it in the challenges phase and you cannot use its plot action. Alright, let me get a break to take a sip of coffee. This card, he calls it Thinking. I like the quote on this card. My father is very good at doing nothing. I don't know, it just amuses me. So he calls it Thinking. 0 cost cancel. Cancels any non-agenda, non-plot triggered ability unless the opponent pays 1 gold. I've already given this card a try. It seems pretty decent. I think some other people have been using it as well. Just another generally annoying Martell card in their bag of tricks that they can have available, which there's now like more cards like that than you can really fit into a single Martell deck. Like, it's hard to put in Vengeance for Elia and his Viper Eyes and this card, he calls it Thinking, and Secret Schemes and Venomous Blade and Gaston Grey. Like, there's not room in the deck for all of it, but this is now an option that is added to the list of lame Martell stuff. It can definitely pop off and, you know, do a lot of work if it cancels something like, I think the big cancel that I've had with it so far is I canceled a Kotho when the last 3 cards in the opponent's hand were Kotho and whatever 2 other cards. So canceling Kotho in that situation means the 2 other cards get discarded and Kotho stays in the hand. And then he got discarded by my Intrigue claim, so that was very powerful. People might say that this is not good because it's too easy for the opponent to cancel by paying 1, but in my experience it's reasonably common that people either save exactly the amounts of gold that they need to do their stuff in challenges phase, in which case you screw up their plans by making them pay 1, or they just don't save any challenges phase gold. I think those are both reasonably common, and you can probably find a good spot to play this event due to that. We've got Drogon, the big new bad boy Drogon. This card is super scary. I don't like this card because I don't like burn. I think it's a little bit too powerful. I mean, maybe shouldn't it have just been like -3 instead of -4? Or I'm not sure. Anyways, uh, that concern aside, concerns of being overpowered aside, it is definitely worth playing. Like I said, super scary character. Sometimes he comes out, and if you don't have an immediate answer, he just murders stuff and you lose. He can definitely win the game if he like targets some important 4 strength character like a Tyrion Lannister. He is more interactive than most burn effects. I'll give him credit there because he actually has to win a challenge as an attacker. So things like Aereo Hota, icon removal, just having a lot of military strength, things like that can block him. And because he's a character ability instead of an event, there are more things that can cancel him. You can use Nightmares, Drown God Fanatic, Treachery. There are various effects that can cancel his ability even when he attempts to use it. But still a very powerful, very scary character. And no attachments means that he cannot be stopped by Milk or Craven. So that some of the normal counters to big, powerful characters are removed. Definitely a card that I would expect to see played fairly often. We've got Glamour. This card is so bad, I'm not sure what to say about this card. It is a 3-cost attachment. How does this even work? Kill attached character to choose a character in your dead pile that was killed this phase. Return the chosen character to play. I guess this is Valar Morghulis Insurance, but it doesn't even work as that because you have to kill the attached character. So whatever it's attached to has to survive the Valar Morghulis. And whatever you're choosing to survive your Valar Morghulis with like a bodyguard, I guess, is probably not going to be something that you want to kill. I mean, you just put the bodyguard on your Robert, and then you're not going to want to kill your Robert with Glamour. So I don't see how this is ever good or playable. Without the action, it's just a 3 gold plus 2 strength attachment, which is terrible. Yeah, I'm not sure what the idea is with this card. I don't expect this to ever be used. We've got Hard Home, a really annoying Night's Watch 6-cost wall, discard your dudes type of card. This card is dominance action, kneel and sacrifice to make an opponent discard a standing character. This is a little bit awkward to use because they can obviously just kneel all their dudes and then this location doesn't do anything. The strategy of this card is you use it with the Bay of Seals in a 6-cost wall deck, and then they have to at least keep a small chud standing, or you will target their big character with your Bay of Seals, stand it up for dominance phase, and make them sack it with Hard Home, which is very powerful. But it is a 2-card combo that the opponent can play around fairly easily still by just not attacking with their Reducer Chud, or whatever small character that they don't care about. So overall, I rate this card as quite annoying if you run into it, but overall probably not a card that should see too much play because it's just a little too easy to play around. Obviously you can try to catch people off guard with the shadow effect, but I would imagine that if the 6-cost wall deck is actually popular enough to be a concern, people will learn to sort of realize that when Night's Watch has a shadow, it could be this card, and they can still play around it. Coffee break. Okay, moving on. In Daznak's Pit, this is a very interesting effect. I think I'm actually going to give this card a try this coming week. This is a very expensive event. It's a shadow event, pay 2 and then pay 3. And the effect is when the challenges phase ends, stand each character, there is an additional challenges phase. So you basically repeat the challenges phase. Obviously the idea here is you get ahead on board state, you find a time where you have more stuff than the opponent, and then you just play this, and you beat them down with 2 consecutive challenges phases. There's a lot of scary characters that you can use this to abuse and push a lead into a victory. Obviously the 6-cost Drogon that I just put up there, you can use them twice in 1 turn this way. With Khal Drogo, you get 4 military challenges in 1 turn. You could even use like Miri Mazdur, things like that. Or you could just, if you're ahead on board state, just win more challenges than them, and that's pretty nice too. The issue is it is a 5-cost event, so I'm not sure, it might be a bit awkward to actually pay for this, but it can be reduced by what is that guy's name? The friggin' king guy. It can be reduced by Hisdar Zolorak. It's exactly Shadow 3 like Aegon, so it's a pretty efficient target for him. I'm not sure if this is actually going to be good, but I think it's worth trying. It does feel a bit like a win more card, because if you have a favorable board state over the opponent anyways, then, maybe you don't need this effect. But I think it could be important, because once you get ahead on board, it is likely that their next plot will be a reset. But if you play this card, you get to use your board advantage for 2 challenges phases before they are able to play Valar Dohaeris or whatever reset that they want to use. So it could potentially be powerful. I think the card's most natural home is in Crossing for obvious reasons, because you can just use Kotho to get a huge board on the first turn and then play this and claim 10 power on the first turn or something nutty like that. But I'm going to try it in a non-crossing deck and see what happens. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it won't be. Iron Victory's Crew. This is a non-unique Greyjoy character with the Ironborn Raider and no attachments. Sort of an interesting collection of traits there. It does not have the Army trait. The Army trait doesn't really do much anyways, but sort of seems like it might. Some of these types of cards do. Anyways, when they enter play, you search your deck for a warship, reveal it, and add it to your hand. Or if it is Iron Victory, you put it straight into play, and then obviously shuffle. Seems like a pretty, standard warship tech card. Not much to say about it. It is fairly expensive, with not, 5 for 4 is not great on stats, and it's a non-unique. Although it's not a 6, so it wouldn't benefit from Great Halls anyways. I'm not really sure if this is worth it. But I lean towards not, just because of the cost to strength ratio and the fact that, okay, I guess you can go and get an Iron Fleet Scout or something like that, but I'm not sure that that's really worth it for an inefficient character with no real abilities. But, if you want to play warships, you can throw this in there, no doubt about it. We've got Maester Miles. This is another Martell icon removal character. Challenges action, kneel Maester Miles to choose a character with printed cost equal to or lower than the number of plot cards in your used pile. Until the end of the phase, that character loses a challenge icon of your choice. This character is pretty bad normally, because if you have a normal 7-card plot deck, he will only be able to target 5-cost characters, which is where you're getting into the really scary characters that you want to actually hit with your icon removal. He will only be able to target those for 1 turn, and then your plot deck resets and you're back to 0 and you're used. And his ability is very weak, and almost to the point of doing nothing for the first few turns. He only has a couple turns where he really might be able to have an impact. Since it requires him to kneel, it's not just an action that he can do whenever, like the 5-cost Nymeria. And he is himself a 2-cost, 2-strength character, so if you're, kneeling him to take an icon off the opponent's 3-cost, that's not really that great and not really worth it. The time that he might be powerful is when you're running the tech that gives you more plots in your used pile, like Ricasso. If you're using Ricasso in a Wars to Come deck with, opening with the Prince Duran's Behest, then maybe he becomes worth it, because you could very quickly get the amount of plots in your used up to 4 or 5. And then they just stay there and keep getting bigger throughout the whole game. And then you could start kneeling him to take icons off scary stuff like 7-cost characters. Maybe he's worth it as a one-of then. Otherwise, probably not. We've got Old Bill Bone. This is an anti-free folk card. He's a Shadow 1 with the ability that when he comes out of Shadows, kneel the opponent's faction card. Basically, the only reason to use this character right now is if you don't like the free folk. And he does give you sort of 1 turn of a reprieve against them. When the new Shadows agenda comes out in the next pack, and Shadows decks with a bunch of Shadows synergy, if that actually becomes a thing, he might be used in those just because he is a cheap Shadow dude, only Shadow cost of 1 with cost-efficient stats. So I think that's a possibility. But for now, just if you don't like free folk, this guy's here. We have the Refurbished Hulk. This is the Greyjoy non-limited economy for the cycle. Just 2 cost, warship, +1 gold, +1 initiative. Really straightforward. Play this if you're playing a warships deck. Do not play it if you're not playing a warships deck. Not much else to say about it. Painted Dogs, we have a new Clansman character, and this is actually a fairly interesting one. This is 4/3, 2 icons, ambush 4, and challenges action, return to your hand to choose and stand a Clansman or Tyrion Lannister. I think if you are playing Clansman, this card is worth using. He gives you another good use for your Harrenhal besides only the Hound, without needing to use Tower of the Hand to bring it back to your hand safely after you've used it in the challenges phase. He can just send himself back with his challenges action, and standing another character, it makes him very efficient with his ability. He gives you a way to spend your ambush gold in the challenges phase. He just sort of helps the Clansman deck run, I feel like. I think Clansman is still not that good, but if you're gonna play it, you should use this character. Another nice thing about this character is he actually has a printed intrigue icon. He's not a military monocon, so he does help address one of the weaknesses of Clansman, I feel like, and he can be used with Tower of the Hand on cheaper dudes like opponents' 3-cost characters. That's also quite nice. Sort of a solid addition. Maybe Clansman will be a thing one day. Who knows? Let me get a sip here. Storm's End Maester. Finally, Baratheon gets a halfway decent 2-cost character. I played this in my most recent Baratheon deck, and it was quite common that I was able to draw cards with this guy when he was on the field. So, 2-cost, he's Claim Soak, and he draws cards. I think he's good. I expect to be using him in like probably all my Baratheon decks because they really need good, cheap Claim Soak guys that actually can do something. I like it, and I hope that they print more stuff like this for Baratheon. I really think it would help. Skagos, the new Stark Sacrifice location. Action, kneel Skagos and sacrifice a standing Stark card to search your deck for a card with the same title and put it into play. So you target a card with this, you sack it, and you bring out another copy of the same card from your deck and put it straight into play. This is a sacrifice tech card, and I think it's pretty good in sacrifice decks. I've been playing it myself in my Stark Kings of Winter sacrifice deck, and it just adds a lot of consistency to the deck. It gives you a way to trigger sacrifice effects without actually losing a character from your board state, and that by itself is pretty useful. Then you get into all kinds of tricks that you can do with it. You can use it on Summer to trigger Summer twice because he enters play again. You can use it with Arya to get her duplicate back. You can use it with Ward to move it to a different character. You can sacrifice the first ward to put a second one into play. The opponent will regain control of the first warded character, but you can then reattach the new ward to whatever other character that you want to take instead. So you can use their first warded character in a challenge, so it's kneeling anyways, and then you swap the ward onto a different guy. That could be strong. You can use it to move Frozen Solid if you ever need to do that. It's hard to even list all of the uses for this card. There's a lot of really tricky stuff you can do. So I think it's pretty worth it for a Stark Sacrifice list. Not much else to say other than that. You've got the Inn at the Crossroads. This is dominance action. Kneel to draw 3 cards and give control of the Inn at the Crossroads to your opponent. So seems like a melee only card. Seems like you would never use this in Joust. But one deck that I have seen this used in where I think it actually might be reasonable is Greyjoy Warships. The idea being that they use this and the opponent takes control of it and then they either discard it or they kneel it with one of many characters in their deck which can kneel locations. That being the 7-cost Victarion that can kneel warships to kneel locations. It can also be knelt by Lordsport Shipwright or Stony Shore Raider. So you can block the opponent from ever actually being able to use it. If you make yourself first player the following turn, you can also Marshal Seabitch and steal it back off of them in the dominance phase to use it twice, 2 turns successively, and that is pretty good as well, I would say. I'm not sure if that's really worth it at the end of the day. Maybe it's still a little too janky, but I think it's at least trying, and it's pretty fun. pretty fun idea, at least. I like the idea of, like, drawing 3 with this and then kneeling it out on the opponent's side and doing wacky stuff like that. I'll probably try and give this a try in a Greyjoy Warships deck whenever I get around to that. We have the Might of the Reach, Tyrell event, pay 3, choose a participating character to get plus 10. Very inefficient card. I don't expect this to ever see play in serious decks because plus 10 is just massive overkill. It's like you only need plus 1 or 2 or 3 usually to push yourself over the edge with a sneaky strength buff effect. Growing Strong and Renly's Ride are what you want, not this. Also, the fact that it costs 3, it's way more expensive, is just huge overkill. And people are like, oh, but you can use it with the 6 cost Brienne from the box, and then she's super good. Well, no, she's not, because then you're paying 3 just for her to stand once. And why would you pay 3 to have a stand ability when you can Marshal Randall Tarley and put the Crown of Golden Roses on him and stand him twice every phase for free without having to pay any more gold? So this card is bad. Pretty much the end of that. We've got 3 Finger Hob, cheap Steward. After you check reserve, if your hand size is lower than reserve, draw 2. This card should be in every Night's Watch deck. Extremely good, not much else to say. One nice thing about this is since it's after the reserve check, if you are 1 below reserve, you will then draw 2 and be 1 over reserve, but you do not have to discard because it is right after the reserve check. You will keep the extra cards. I mean, just a really solid Night's Watch draw effect to go along with the Ravens and stuff. Not sure what else there is to say about this guy. Last and possibly least, we have the Walk of Atonement. There's Cersei's legs there as she walks through King's Landing. This is a Lannister event. It has the 7 trait. That's a little interesting. Dominance action, discard any amount of power from a character you control for each power discarded. Discard 1 card at random from each opponent's hand and draw 1 card. So this has the potential for a really big card advantage swing, but the problems are several. The first problem is that you have to actually get power on characters to discard with this effect, so that might be too awkward to set up. I'm not sure if that will be like the downfall of the card, if it'll be not good because it's just too hard to get power on your dudes. If nothing else, you can probably use it in a 7-cost Cersei deck, though, and as long as she, gets a couple power on her, which is extremely easy to do, then this event becomes, good enough with that ability of discarding. The other problem of the card is that I think this type of effect would be good in a meta where you're playing against a lot of slow control decks that are trying to keep their hand size up, like sort of the old school Martell Wars to Come or, Martell whatever type of decks. But that's not the type of game that it is right now. Right now, it's valuing like immediate tempo advantage and like barfing your hand out as fast as possible every turn and playing you win or you die or stuff like that. People aren't really holding their hand back that much, and like attacking the opponent's hand is not super powerful. Not with a large effect like this that would be discarding 2 or 3 at a time. So that's why I think it's really not that good at the moment. But if the metagame switches and it goes back to those type of slow control decks, I think this is a card that could punish them. If, on turn 2 or 3, you're able to play this to discard 2 or 3 from their hand and then you draw a bunch, that's pretty bad in a long control type of matchup. That could be strong. And also you're Lannister, so hopefully you can pay the 2 with like Tyrion gold or something, right? You're supposed to have gold in Challenges phase for this dominance action. So yeah, sort of a matchup dependent card, I would say. It may just end up being bad in general because it's just too awkward to set it up. But I think if it does end up seeing play, that would be the circumstances under which it would be useful, would be in a control-oriented game state. So yeah, that's all 20 cards. Those are my thoughts on the cards. We got a lot of good ones in this pack. I mean, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8. So almost half the pack are cards that are like guaranteed to see some play. And then you have some that are still situational and maybe useful in certain decks, like, Painted Dogs or Iron Victory's crew may see some play in Warships. Seems like a pretty good pack overall. Also, nothing in the pack feels too overpowered or obnoxious. I don't really like Pinch of Powder or Drogon. I do think these are a little above curve. I'm not big fans of these. I mean, Pinch of Powder Could it at least be terminal? I feel like if you use this on a 6 cost character, that's powerful enough to warrant, the attachment being terminal. Drogon, obviously, I just don't like burn, but these aren't as bad as other cards that have been printed in the past, like Flea Bottom or Consuming Flames or things like that. So not too much to complain about overall. So yeah, do another one of these when Daggers in the Dark releases. That one should be interesting because I will be talking about and playing with the new Shadows agenda, and we will see what happens with that. Anyways, see you later.